So a book can only say so much, because you can only write so much. It- although really, if I had the time and people had time to read 1,000 pages, I would have written up to 1,000 pages. However, one has to learn to keep things concise and straight to the point, so that don't go around circles wasting time. Get straight to the point, articulate yourself in a manner that anybody can understand. You know, um,
Yeah.
but to go back to the point that you are making, I've obviously written this book primarily because a lot of people are writing to me saying, "We see your posts, man, about property investing." I was writing a lot on property investing at the time. I was also writing a lot on money, and how to use your money to build your portfolio, be it as a family or as an individual. And people were saying, "We don't get the concept,"
Yeah.
and can you explain more? And I spent a lot of time explaining in the inbox. Then I thought, nah, man, no, I don't have the time. I'm gonna put it in the book.
Too good.
Yeah,
Too good to be in the
exactly. Let me
inbox.
just put it in a
Yeah.
book, and you're gonna buy the book and read it. And the book primarily
Mm.
covers, um, from you knowing your significance as a person, for instance, understanding what your significance is, what is tied to your significance, what are things that make you tick, what makes you angry, what makes you
Yeah.
excited, and getting into, if you're already in a business and you're in an informal business, how can you formalize that business so that it can be a business that is bankable and the bank can give you funding or a loan for you to buy a property? How can you start your own property investment portfolios even if you are not a millionaire? How can you
Mm.
start? In the book that speaks of the fact that there's this flips government flip subsidy. As long as they earn more than 3,501 rands, and that in 22,000 rands, they'll get an amount from the subsidy, depending on the amount of and the bond that the property that they're buying is worth, right? And being able to conscientize people to the fact that even when you earn that low, you are able to buy a property. Now, I'll give an example of a lady that worked at the municipality as a cleaner. I love that lady's story, because she wrote to me 2020 and said, I've read the book, I've seen everything that's in it. I'm taking the risk and I'm buying a property. And she bought a cleaner in the municipality. She was earning eight
Mm.
grand, she told me. She bought that property and she was granted a bond by the bank. She put tenants in it and continued to stay at home. That's not the end of. Last year, she writes to me and says, "I've saved over 60,000 rands." That was the end of the year last year. And I'm going to put a down payment on my second property. And the bank is looking at my stuff and they're willing to give me a bond on the property. Now, hang on. I thought properties were for people that were earning 50,000, 100,000. Right?
Was
I thought it was for young professionals that are driving big cars. And also it moves people from immediately, because the phenomenon in our community and society is that when I get a job, the first thing that I want to buy is what? It's a car. But instead of buying a car, I can sacrifice, get myself my first property, rent it out. When I get cash flow from that property, then the cash flow can pay for my car. And the book
yeah.
speaks of the cornerstones of wealth creation: business, property, shares, and expands on that, right? To build wealth, you either work in a business or run a business. You and I now, we either run businesses or we work for businesses that pay us salaries. That's how we make money. There's no other way, right? And then from the money that we earn in our businesses as business owners or as employees, then we either invest in a property portfolio or we invest in a share portfolio. Those three things have been tested for centuries. Now, in the days of Abraham, when you read the Bible, the man was rich, the Bible says. But he was rich because he had cattle and what is this, goats and sheep. What was that? That was in business, is it not? When you look at the days of Jesus, when
Yes.
Jesus was born, the Bible says he was born in, but it also says he was born in a manger because the inn was full. So that day when Jesus, the Messiah, was born, someone was fully let making money. that's a combination of property and business. There's this famous story in the Bible that Jesus talks about. What is that? The good Samaritan that finds that guy on the street beaten up, and he wraps him up, and cleans him up. That story, I read it with a business eye, because someone made money from the story. Because it says he took that person and put him in an inn and paid for months for that person to stay there. So the inn owner was making money out of someone being beaten up, and the good Samaritan was helping that person.
Yeah.
So there for centuries. That's over 2,000 years ago, that story that was told. Shares today, when kings needed spears to be made, and they go to a spearman and say, make 1,000 spears. If he didn't have the resources to make those spears, somebody invested gold into his business so that he could pay that person when the king pays him. These are recorded in books. So for centuries, business property shares will always be the cornerstone of wealth creation, because they've been tested by centuries. Right? So when one wants to be wealthy, they have to understand that that's where their focus has to be. Now, new things have come into the market, Bitcoin and all of that, but it's not been tested by half of it.
Yes.
Not been tested.
That was a big Joel. That was a big Joel to say, look, here's where you started. This is how you do it. If there's any creativity, develop creativity around these things, because they will always be the center. Now, when you speak about the Bible, the stories, what comes to my mind is history, and how we just spoke about education. Which education would be necessary if there's something that we're trying to achieve, right? And I find that history of civilizations at large, I find it to be very important, because if we have always been traders, then it means even the models that exist today are based on how we have always traded. So if you're going to lose out on the knowledge of how this thing evolved, you might not get it today.
Wow.
So if we're going to say livestock is the investment, livestock teaches you about shares and dividends, livestock teaches you about multiplication and diversification of a portfolio, it makes sense. It doesn't make finance money, but it tells us that when there was no money and we had cattle and livestock and other things, those are what made the wealth. That's what built the wealth. So we just need to follow the wealth line and the inventions and the development of metals to find what's happening today. And then, because we have the resources today, we don't have the resources from years ago. Today we live in flats. You don't live in a 5 hectare with cattle. You're not born into cattle even now anymore. Yes. I find that to be very interesting that you speak about the things that we need to be collecting to move forward.
Absolutely. And I mean, it goes beyond that as well. To have the right mindset. When you talk,
of course,
what you've just articulated now, for one to fully grasp it, apply it, their mindset has to be in the right space. So an entrepreneurial mindset has to be developed, and that's why I'm on tour this year throughout the country. What am I doing? I'm conscientizing people with entrepreneurship, because it's a mindset. Let me give